In the past, I have made use of these screens for my sermon, and I will do that today quite heavily because I believe we all need, for those of us who are visual learners, it helps a lot. So I think it is worth it, and we will do that today. Because we talk about concrete things today, brick and mortar even. All the scriptures and the whole day celebrates a term called the temple. And what does that mean? What did it mean to Jesus, the Israelites, to us? So I'd like to take a step back and do that now. There were two temples in Jerusalem. The one that Jesus had looked like, put that one up there, this one. This is the one Jesus would have visited. If you know anybody who's Jewish, you should ask them, what did the temple mean to the Jewish people? Well, it was the center of their religious life. It was the house of Yahweh. It was where they pilgrimaged. It's not the same as a synagogue. A synagogue was just a house where they would read the scriptures and reflect on them, and that's it. It was like a Bible study. The temple is where the sacrifice took place. The Passover took place. It was where they received forgiveness. It's where God's presence was. Actually, as you would go deeper inside the temple, it became more and more holy. It was called the Holy of Holies, where the priest would enter once a year and say God's name in front of the Ark of the Covenant, which actually contained the Word of God, the Ten Commandments, the manna from heaven, and Aaron's rod. Now, both of these temples were destroyed. This one, the first one by David, was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, and this one was destroyed by the Romans. But Jesus went there, we know at least in his early life 3 times. We went there when he was first born, the presentation of the Lord in the temple, where he is entered into the sacraments and introduced to the Lord at the presentation, went there as a baby. Then we know he went there later when he was 12. And he remembered the majesty of that temple, where he was debating with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, doing what he was supposed to do, as he called it, this is my Father's house. This is my Father's house. Now, at this spot today is a Muslim mosque, just to put that in context. But when Jesus went back up there, when he was in his 30s, he remembered what the temple looked like, but something in those 30 years had happened to the temple. You could say it was infected. You could say it was defiled. It was full of money changers. It became a business, so people were stealing from others. And it just became the norm. And when he walked in there, we hear he cleansed the temple again. And he didn't walk in there, and you can put up that next one. He didn't walk in there and say, hey guys, what's going on? Why don't you tell me what you're doing? Teach me this culture. What's the underlying social and economic factors that cause you to start selling these things? He walks in there with a whip and acts like a boss, a dad, a father, a pastor, and starts tipping over the tables, running them off, being a pastor, a man. He wasn't being nice. He sure wasn't being kind, but he was loving them. He was cleansing it. He had righteous anger as he cleansed them out. He was acting like a man. He was revealing the Father to them and being a cleansing agent in God's house, in the temple of God. Now, having said that, when we talk about the cleansing of the temple, it wasn't the first time these temples were cleansed. We can go all the way back in the Old Testament for something we as Catholics need to recognize. You know, around Christmas, we'll hear people say, Happy Hanukkah. Well, what's Hanukkah? It's in our Bible. It's not in the Jewish Bible. It's not in the Protestant Bible. It's in 1st and 2nd Maccabees. This is the first temple built by David. This is what it probably looked like. But in the Maccabean revolt, pagans took over the temple, defiled the altar, did blasphemous things on the altar, brought in their own pagan deities, statues, and defiled all the sacred vessels. And when they did that, the Jewish people didn't just lay down and take it. Oh, some of them did. But Judah Maccabeus and his sons started a revolt, started a war that lasted for years and was violent. And it had to be Judah Maccabeus, Matthias, and his sons who eventually, years later, had to go back in and cleanse the temple by violence and kick out all the pagan altars, the pagan statues. They had to purify all the holy objects. And there was a little vial there, a little vase of oil that lit them for 9 days. That's what we hear now when we see a menorah for Hanukkah. I think when we say to each other, Happy Hanukkah, we think of something nice and light and pretty and, candles. No, it was an act of cleansing. It was an act of serious cleansing, even an act of violence. But it did so because it had to, because the pagans had overtaken it. Now, having said all that about the Jewish temple, today we celebrate the dedication of the Lateran Basilica in Rome. This is not St. Peter's. It's a different basilica. It is the worldwide basilica. St. Peter's is in Vatican City. It's kind of a chapel of Vatican City. This is outside. This is the church of the world. The Pope sits here in presiding over it, and it's a beautiful chapel. Inside and out, it has the apostles. As you can see, inside it has all the apostles on either side, and they're holding the instruments of their execution in their hands, whether it's a noose or a saw or a sword. But you can't help but go in there and look up and be led to prayer and awe. That's the way we used to build temples and cathedrals and basilicas, in awe and beauty and wonder. Like I said, it is beautiful. But having said that, we have to admit, especially in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s, something crept into our architects. Something crept into church builders and started building other things. So if you don't know what this is the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels in Los Angeles. It's ugly. It looks like a Russian prison, inside and out. It has no right angles. It's seen as being diverse. Well, that was built in 2002 with $200 million, and it's not going anywhere for a long time. But hopefully, maybe 100 years, a bishop or cardinal will walk in there, not with rope, but with a wrecking ball, and take the thing down. Because they've gotten used to it. Go to LA, visit the cathedral, and they'll walk you around and say, isn't it pretty? And you're gonna wanna say politely, go, yeah, I guess. How much you spend on this place? Because inside your temperament, you know that this is not even close to being pretty. But something happened. Something has crept in. And we have to watch out for it because we get used to ugly. We get used to it. Now, we've also known for centuries what an altar should look like. We know what it should look like. It's supposed to be beautiful, vaulted. Take your eyes up as if you're actually in heaven where the mysteries happen and heaven comes down. The image on your left is St. Peter's Basilica in Rome with the canopy, the high altar that the Pope says Mass. And you can't help but be in awe at the beauty and the work that it took to build that. But also, some of you may recognize the little image next to it. That's the Church of the Visitation in Westphalia, just down the road. That church burned down a few years ago. But that community was determined to build a beautiful church with the tradition in mind, And if you walk over there today, you cannot help but be in awe. Drop down on your knees and pray. You feel like you're in heaven and it is glorious. Having said that, there are places in our country that have gotten used to ugly. This is the chapel and the Catholic Student Center in Berkeley, California. It looks horrific. It looks like a dungeon. It looks like the set of Planet of the Apes or something. It's gray and awful, and that's their worship space. And if you go there today, go to their website. Go, I did. They'll say, it's very simple and prayerful and dainty. It's ugly, and they've gotten used to it. And it's going to take maybe, hopefully in the next few decades, another bishop in Oakland to come in there with a wrecking ball and say, what were you people thinking? It takes a man to walk in and say, what have you done to my house of God? But these sort of things can grow on you. And it becomes part of you. And then you don't see it. Even though now we look at it and go, man, that's ugly. But that has happened. Oh, it's starting to be cleansed. Thank God for like people in Westphalia and other new churches. They look around at these churches and say, we're not doing that again. We learned. We went through the ugly stage. But we pulled out of that now. You know, but I think we have to remember when it talks about cleansing our temples, the temple, the church, that the home is the domestic church. The home is the one who teaches us about community, about meals, about family. And I like this image especially because it shows a family with a father around a meal. The meal looks pretty good, actually. But what is he doing? What is his children doing? They're locked and loaded on each other. Their eyes are connected. They're laughing, sharing, blessing each other, coming closer. And every time that happens, that spits in the devil's eye. He hates family. He loves ugly. So I think that's what we have to remember at our own families. Is that kitchen table a sacred space, a beautiful place where fathers preside? But if we're honest, many of our tables look like this, don't they? Where everybody's there and the food is there, and there is the only one without a phone in their hand is the baby at the far end. And what would it take to stop this kind of thing? I would say a daddy, a pastor, a father walks in, put those things away. It's happened in my house. I've gone home to visit my parents, and I'll have my phone, and my dad or mom go, you're addicted to that thing. And then it reminds me to put it away. But it takes something like that to clean it up because that becomes normal. And because just the way things are. And if a single mother walks into her home and her kids are all on their phones, and she says, get off their phones, watch the fireworks. It is not fun. Jesus always did something around a table and a meal, and he depended on them watching him. I could just imagine Judas pulling out his phone, checking the scores, going, go ahead, I'll be right with you. So let's get a little bit more prickly here, a little bit more close to home sometimes, of what things used to look like. These are what most of us remember as nuns. I was taught by nuns. They never touched us, but they scared the hell out of us. But what were sisters, women religious meant to do? They were meant to catechize us, comfort us, discipline us, order us towards the sacraments. They were one. They worked in the church. They were faithful. They loved priests, and they loved their vocation. They were ready to put their old life behind. They stayed in community, and they had a community charism, community life. They worked in our schools, our hospitals, our orphanages, and nursing homes to especially bring Christ to them. That's what a nun was supposed to do. And some of them are doing that more often. Tomorrow I will go up to Waco again and say Mass for some traditional young nuns in full habit who only love the Lord and only want to pray and invite people to their life. Having said that, something happened in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They turned into nuns on the bus. It was no longer about holiness, salvation, discipline, and conversion. This is Sister Campbell. She's one of the nuns on the bus. And what was there? What were they oriented for? Well, healthcare, immigration, and climate change. You don't need to be a nun and fight for that. You could just be a politician. But something happened. They were infected. I'll tell you right now, they were infected by liberation theology, feminist theology, Marxism, socialism. They were infected by it. And what made them? They took off their habits, started living in apartments, started working for social justice, and their orders are dying. Other orders are growing up because they remember that last slide I showed you, what made them alive and full of life. So one last thing that hits kind of home, especially for this parish, and it's about time I broached it with all of you. If you grew up in the 70s and 80s, you remember altar service looked kind of like this. Just young people, girls, little boys, sometimes even adults. You could see the faceted stained glass in the back window. That was kind of a thing in the 70s. Well, that was kind of about 30 years ago that started happening, and that's when vocations dropped off. But for those of you who are a little bit older, you remember for hundreds of years, altar servers looked like this. They were called altar boys. So what is the purpose of an altar boy? Well, do we have to have them? I mean, we could probably set up everything up here and do it ourselves. But no, an altar server, an altar boy is an apprentice to the priest. They don't serve y'all, they serve us. They serve at the altar. And that's why those boys look like our boys. We have to cleanse that of that. Nothing like girls are dirty. Girls are beautiful. Boys are not. But a girl will never serve at the altar. So having a female altar server is at best imprudent and at worst cruel, because they will never serve at the altar. And maybe, just maybe, they'll consider serving at the altar as a priest. Only boys can be daddies. Only boys can be fathers. We have all kinds of things for the girls to do. They can be lectors. We have female ushers. We have people in the choir, Eucharistic ministers. There's a table back there for the Women's Society. Men, you can't be in the Women's Society. Sorry. But we have to start remembering what history has taught us in a world where boys are in the Girl Scouts and girls are in the Boy Scouts. And that's becoming normal. They're just getting used to it. And it takes a man, a church, a father to walk in there sometimes with a whip or something to say, this ain't right. Let's clean this up. Now, having said all of that, remember that even when Jesus cleansed the temple, he said he was pointing to his own body. That the most important temple that you have is your own, in your own heart. Now, I don't have an image of this. I could just tell you about it, what that looks like. The cleansing of your own temples. Yesterday, I was at Cedar Break. I was hearing confessions for St. John Vianney in Round Rock, their confirmation retreat. So they asked me to come and hear confessions. That's fine. So I went over there from 10 to about noonish and was hearing confessions for teenagers. Now, hearing confessions of little kids are almost always the same. Adults are usually pretty the same. When you hear teenagers' confessions, you never know what you're going to hear. And you have to be ready and say things like, what? What does that mean? You did what? And they have to explain to me some of these things. But I do know many of them needed a good cleansing, a scouring that even involved tears, especially as they walked by or they walked out. And after about an hour or so of doing my own cleansing work, I realized I should go to confession. I need to cleanse my own temple to come in here and talk to you. So when I came out of the confessional, I saw Father Patrick. He had just finished. Father Patrick Ebner. I said, Father Patrick, could you hear my confession? Oh, sure, come on in. So we went in the confessional, made my confession, and I was hoping he would say, okay, Father John, that's 3 Our Fathers and you can go. That's not what happened. That's not what happened. It was more like, are you doing this? Or you been devoted to this? Have you kept up with this? And I had to be able to answer all that. He pulled out the scouring pad and was cleansing me up. Because when our temple is cleansed and your temple is cleansed, then we can go back to that first slide of what the temple was represented. It represented the universe. It represented the world. It had a cosmic aspect, that it was supposed to be an instrument of cleansing the cosmos. So that means all of you are meant to be cleansers of this world, a world that is confused, full of sin, lost God, and you're supposed to act as a corrective. Now, should you go, over to Walmart and start turning over the tables? No, don't do that. Sometimes I want to do that at Cracker Barrel when they have Christmas ornaments up in August. I was like, what are you doing? It's not even Advent. It's not even Thanksgiving. But we can be a constant voice, body, and tongue to a world that needs cleansing. As Christ cleansed the temple, he cleansed the church, and he gives us the tools and the help to cleanse ourselves so that we can go out and be missionaries to the world. It starts with cleansing of our own temples.